Thank you, Neera, for the introduction. A little background information about me and how I got here, just enough to give you some context for this webinar. Like Neera said, my name is Melissa McKay. I've been in software development in some way, shape, or form as an engineer for the past 20 years. Primarily, my background is in server-side Java, but I do have experience with many different languages, frameworks, technologies, and tools of the trade. Over the years, I started getting more and more involved with the community and began speaking at a few events. And last year, I decided it was time to make the jump to developer advocacy. So forward to today, I'm approaching my 1-year anniversary and am still super excited to be a part of the JFrog Developer Relations team. The JFrog DevRel team is positioned to be an asset to the community. Our developer advocates have been developers and engineers themselves and still are, and so we have empathy for you. We sympathize with the challenges that you deal with day to day in the world. And one of our goals through many different outlets, webinars like this, blogs, conference talks, or just our own research, is to help ease your transition into better ways of working, or simply just to help give you validation that you are already moving in the right direction. With that said, my contact information is here, so please feel free to reach out. Before we get started, take another look at the widgets on your screen in front of you. Take advantage of your real estate there. Don't be afraid of the Q&A box, and please don't feel like you need to wait until the end of the session before you ask questions. We have people available here to answer questions live during the session, and if for some reason we can't answer a question right away, we'll be sure to follow up with you personally afterward. All right, let's get started. All of you here today registered expecting an introduction to Artifactory on the JFrog platform. I expect my audience is going to be pretty varied as well, from software developers to operation engineers to various levels of management. All of you are here to learn more about the specifics of Artifactory and what it can do for you. Before diving into those details, I'm going to start out with a problem statement to give you a basic understanding of the value of the Artifactory solution. I'll follow that up with some history of Artifactory and how it has evolved over time. Then some basic information about the architecture and the features you'll want to know about and take advantage of. I'll explain a little about where Artifactory fits in the DevOps ecosystem. And finally, give you a quick demo of the Artifactory UI. After the demo, I'll leave some time for Q&A and answer some of the more common questions we get about Artifactory and the JFrog platform. Again, for if whatever reason we are unable to get an answer to a question during this time slot, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterward. So let's start with the problem, the root of the problem. I found this is the best way to begin explaining just about any technology or framework that's unfamiliar. Taking a step back and talking about the problem that we're trying to solve will get you a long way in deciding whether or not this is going to meet your needs. It's not enough to know how to do something or how something works. You need to know the why. This is truly the age of the binary. Software is everywhere, and every day new solutions are created. Old ones are updated and improved. Managing the sheer volume of these resources adds a lot of complexity to a project. Also, this problem is not something that is relegated to tech companies only. There are organizations out there creating software in every type of field you can imagine, from fast food to financial firms. All of them need to get their software out quickly, cleanly, and regularly. So you can see where I'm going with this. Sorting through these necessary software components can quickly become a monumental task with some pretty grim consequences if they aren't managed correctly and end up in production in some erroneous state. Here's a short and very incomplete list of symptoms that indicate it's due time to take managing your binaries and code artifacts more seriously. All of these problems will result in time and money being spent in ways that won't benefit your release plans. How do you know if it's time to make some improvements? If you are unable to reliably reproduce builds because you do not have a way to pull on demand a bill of materials for your software. If troubleshooting a broken build is inefficient because you've had a hard time determining whether the failure is because of a change made internally or an unexpected update of a third-party dependency. If your developers ever get blocked from further development or from delivering because they cannot retrieve a needed third-party artifact that has suddenly become unavailable. If you've had several different copies of the same artifact in a variety of different places and you don't know which ones are actively being used or which ones are saved to delete. And if your build times have increased or your builds simply time out and fail because pulling third-party dependencies has suddenly started to take longer. I could really go on and on here. These problems can be addressed and mitigated by utilizing a binary repository manager like Artifactory. This is an illustration of one of the most basic use cases that includes the use of Artifactory. Later in this presentation, I'll make the world a whole lot bigger than this, but for now, let's start with an explanation of the process of continuous integration. Here, all the binaries and software artifacts are stored and retrieved from an instance of Artifactory. A developer writes some code, pushes it up to a source code repository. That commit then triggers a CI server, a continuous integration server, in this case a Jenkins server, to build a new version using the new changes. Assuming everything builds successfully and passes automated quality checks like unit tests, the build information in the artifact itself is pushed to Artifactory. The developer can then build locally, pulling needed artifacts from Artifactory and repeat the entire process. The result is quicker iterations of the addition of features, bug fixes, and other changes that need to be done before moving to the next step of the lifecycle. My goal with that extremely brief introduction was to satisfy any immediate questions about what Artifactory actually is. I'll go into more depth on its capabilities later in the presentation. But now that you have a foothold on what Artifactory is all about, let's get into some of the history of Artifactory and JFrog and how they have evolved over the years. At least in the circles that I've run in, it seems that the product name Artifactory is much more well-known than the name JFrog. I've used Artifactory as a developer over the years, and I'll admit that for a long time, I didn't even make that connection between Artifactory and the fact that it was a product of JFrog, the company. When I started at JFrog, I went looking for some background on the subject, and I found this fun story in our public knowledge base. The gist here is that there are two stories behind the name JFrog. One is inspired by a French fairy tale about a boy named J and his collection of frogs, and the fact that one of the JFrog founders, Fred Simon, is French. The other is based on the fact that the first repository type that Artifactory supported was Java. J is for Java, and frogs are fun, so the founders ran with it. I love the last statement here. We will let you choose which story you would like to believe in. So I'm going to pass that on to you all as well. Now that you have some JFrog trivia under your belt, let's talk a little bit about what JFrog has been up to over the last decade and what the company has been building toward. This webinar is primarily about the ins and outs of Artifactory specifically, but in order for you to have a good handle on how it fits into the JFrog product suite today, I'll touch on a few different products and features that you may be less familiar with. There have been some big developments over the years at JFrog. This is a brief rundown of some of the big milestones accomplished beginning from Artifactory to what we now call the JFrog Platform. This will help you better understand how all of the tooling, including Artifactory, is related and complementary. Back in 2006, the open source edition of Artifactory was released as an on-prem installation. In 2009, cloud SaaS subscription models were introduced. In 2012, the cloud distribution platform Bintray was released. Artifactory evolved into an enterprise-grade solution over 2014 and 2015, and a security vulnerability scanning product was introduced in 2017 called X-Ray, which would flag and alert on various issues. Then early in 2019, there was some buzz about an exciting announcement. JFrog acquired the company Shippable. Shippable was a cloud-based CI/CD platform, and this functionality was added into our Enterprise Plus offering. This product became known as JFrog Pipelines. JFrog Pipelines actually went GA in 2020, early 2020, and all of this culminated in the new JFrog platform at the end of February. The JFrog platform was the result of years of effort and is a thoughtful approach on how to make the experience of the JFrog product suite as seamless as possible. Prior to the JFrog platform, each product was managed separately with separate UIs and separate behind-the-scenes administration. If you can imagine, it became a challenge keeping this all together and coordinated. The JFrog platform solves a lot of these issues by simplifying installation, administration, and management of the entire product suite. It's a true end-to-end DevOps solution, and that last statement is worth repeating and expounding on. It's hybrid. The JFrog platform is the industry's first hybrid end-to-end universal DevOps platform. It's hybrid because we offer both on-premise and cloud solutions, or even a mix of the two if that's what you need in your environment. It's end-to-end, meaning our product suite handles the organization, management, and analysis of your software development workflows all the way from source control to distribution. And it's universal, because not only does it support all major package managers and integrates with leading CI servers and other DevOps tools that you already have, you can scale to infinity by clustering your DevOps environment as your business grows. So this is a heavy slide. Lots of information, but I included it because it gives a lot of detail on the different components available to you in the JFrog platform. In the context of when would you use Artifactory, there's a lot here. Artifactory gives you tracking of your binaries and container images from development to release and all of the builds between. If you're ready to scale or need multi-site replication or high availability, it's time to bring in Artifactory. If you've gotten to the point where you need to mitigate the risk of including known vulnerabilities, maintain compliance with license agreements, determine how to remediate a vulnerability or prevent specific vulnerabilities from making it to production, it's time to take a look at X-Ray. If you need a flexible CI/CD solution that minimizes the amount of scripting you need to do for your automation and progresses your software automatically through quality gates at enterprise scale, all from a single trigger, start taking a look at JFrog Pipelines. If you need to securely sign and distribute your binaries to multiple remote locations, check out JFrog Distribution. And finally, if you have a global operation with development sites and multiple JFrog platform services to manage around the world, and you want centralized administration of all of them, enter Mission Control. Adding to our initial illustration of that simplest use case for continuous integration I showed earlier, the world feels a little bit bigger now with the addition of JFrog Pipelines and the new JFrog platform. Each component plays an important role in the software development lifecycle from development all the way to distribution. Now that you've had an explanation of how the JFrog platform came to be, you can see why it's difficult to talk just about Artifactory now without talking about its new living quarters and potential roommates within the JFrog platform. Artifactory remains the core of the JFrog platform. This will be more understood when we look at the architecture of the product. This slide shows all of the pieces and parts and how they fit together. It's a simple architectural diagram showing how everything is connected. The latest major release of Artifactory, version 7, is the basis of the JFrog platform. To be clear, when you get version 7 or greater of Artifactory, you will be getting the JFrog platform. The actual components and features that are available to you in addition to Artifactory, that includes pipelines, X-Ray, mission control, and distribution, will be based on your purchase license. Version 7 introduces the concept of the router, and communication with other components in the product suite is through their designated routers. Artifactory itself provides the UI, access credentials, and replication of content. This is where I get to use the buzz phrase, single pane of glass, where all your administration, configuration, and access permissions for your JFrog products is centralized. Apart from the UI, there's a full REST API, which we'll cover later in this webinar, on how you can interact with all of these components. Artifactory is a universal binary repository manager. It centralizes the way binaries are controlled, stored, and managed, and provides a single source of record for all of the artifacts that you produce along your software development lifecycle. Not only can you manage all of your binaries that you produce internally, but you can also maintain a cache of any third-party packages that are used in your builds. This gives you the ability to have a complete bill of materials for your builds so that you can reproduce them with the exact required versions. If you can imagine, having this bill of materials at your fingertips gives you the advantage of being able to quickly troubleshoot build issues that could be the result of upgrades or changes to specific components. Also, having a cache of third-party packages under your jurisdiction and control keeps you from suffering broken builds due to unavailability of a package because it's temporarily unavailable from the source, it's been moved, it's been renamed, or even if it's just been deleted remotely. Artifactory currently supports over 27 package managers and CI servers, and we hit all of the big ones: Maven, NPM, Python, NuGet, Gradle, Go, and Helm, including Kubernetes and Docker. We're constantly adding more support for other types of packages, and if you happen to find one we don't support specifically or something custom, you have the ability to set up generic repositories. For CI servers, we have integrations with Jenkins, Circle CI, Travis CI, TeamCity, Bamboo, and more. For the package types that Artifactory supports, full metadata is provided. Let's go into more detail about how Artifactory actually stores all of these artifacts and binaries that you produce, as well as cache. Storage is a huge problem. It really needs to be thoughtfully considered since there can be absolute hard limits on resources. Even though storage is getting cheaper and less of a concern than it used to be, Artifactory has a clever way of minimizing its storage requirements. It uses checksum-based storage, which translates to every unique artifact is only stored once. This slide shows an example of the file structure underneath Artifactory. When an artifact is placed, a SHA-1 checksum is generated, and the file is actually stored in buckets with names based on the first two digits of the checksum. The checksum, the node path, and the repository are all linked together in a database record. These are some of the benefits of leveraging checksum-based storage. A single artifact can be referenced from multiple different repositories without the actual file being copied multiple times. This technique not only maximizes available storage space, it reduces transmit costs as well, especially if you have taken a hybrid approach or are utilizing a SaaS subscription. For example, when building and composing large Docker images, only the deltas or the changes you've made in the form of smaller Docker layers will be pushed over the wire and placed. This space-saving, time-saving, and money-saving technique becomes even more important when you need to start scaling your Artifactory resources and include high availability with replication. If you need to replicate out artifacts to other development sites, it's much more efficient to do this once. I've talked a lot about storage. That is the basis of Artifactory functionality, but it's important to remember that Artifactory offers much more than just simple storage. There are several features and advantages of Artifactory that make it superior in this class of products. One of the most advantageous things about Artifactory offers you is the collection and storage of metadata to serve as your single source of truth. For every build in your CI process, all related metadata is tagged and stored in a relational database and is queryable via AQL, or Artifactory Query Language, which is exposed as a RESTful API. Metadata is automatically applied to all builds and artifacts produced, but you can also apply custom metadata. For example, you may need to record the use of several different CI vendors or other in-house tools. QA teams can apply custom data related to quality gates, or promotion. Another use of metadata is for advanced build cleanup over time. In general, a lack of information results in fear, and this is best exemplified by large customer repositories where administrators are afraid to clean anything up because of the risk of breaking future builds. Applying more metadata can give more flexibility for cleanup solutions. On the subject of large repositories, let's go over the basics of Artifactory repository structure. One of the things we see a lot is companies using one massive local repository for their usage, depending on the package type. Save for Maven, which at least Maven has a snapshot and a release repository by default. Having a single repository like this that just grows over time can cause some headaches when it comes time to replicate to another site or to move to a hybrid or SaaS solution. Having everything lumped together makes it difficult to manage what can be cleaned up and really causes you to lose some flexibility when you want to make changes. And now you have to figure out how to move a 10 terabyte array. Another issue that hampers the workflow is not making use of virtual repositories. How to use these can be confusing at first, so I'll be going over exactly what these are and what they're for. There are 3 different types of repositories that are available in Artifactory. Local repos are where you want to store everything that you produce internally. These are your builds, your binaries, your files, your libraries. These things come from your internal Maven builds, your Docker images, your own Helm charts, NPM builds, or other generic files. Remote repositories are where you store your third-party dependencies that you rely on. These can be from other teams or from other public central repositories. Examples of these are JCenter, Docker Hub, npm.org, PyPy, NuGet. Each remote repository is set up with the remote URL you want to be able to pull dependencies from. Anytime you have an internal build that references your remote repository, Artifactory will check the local cache first to see if it already exists before reaching out to pull anything new. Virtual repositories are where the magic happens for developers. These are repositories that are actually combinations of local and remote repositories. Any repository that a user or a group needs access to can be added into a virtual repository. You can also prioritize the order in which the repositories are searched in order to make build times more efficient. The important thing to note here is that a virtual repository provides a single repo URL that glues the local and remote repositories together. This means that developers won't need to change their environment to access different repositories. This is all controlled by the administration of the virtual repository. Continuing where we left off in our description of the repository types, this is a best practice for naming your local repositories, having them reflect your dev flow. Here's an example of matching repository names with your software development lifecycle. There's a 4-part naming scheme used here. The first part of the name is the name of either a team or a product. In this case, I've used app. The second part is the package type. The third part is the maturity, as in which stage of the development cycle does it reflect. This is the important part that I want to highlight. By organizing artifacts this way, a product team now has the flexibility of promoting an artifact through the software development lifecycle. For example, once an artifact has been through QA and is ready to be promoted to staging, it can be removed from the QA repository and put in the staging repository. This method of promotion allows you to set up permission models based on the environment these repositories should be available for, rather than solely around specific users or teams. For example, if a production environment only has access to repositories that are specific to production and artifacts are promoted, in other words, copied or moved, to a production environment only when they have passed certain quality gates, then you can avoid accidentally deploying artifacts prematurely. The last part of the naming scheme is a physical topology locator. In this case, I used local. If these were managing replicated artifacts somewhere else, I would give them a different designation. Let's jump away from repositories now and take a quick look at what else is in the box with Artifactory. Artifactory has a full REST API that's behind everything that you can do in the UI. You can also tie into other systems or infrastructure that you have. You can deploy artifacts, you can clean up artifacts, you can apply metadata throughout. As I mentioned, all of the Artifactory UI functionality can be accomplished with the REST API. Here's an example of a REST API command. This is using curl to deploy an artifact to a repository. The JFrog CLI is also available to use in your automation. There are several installation methods available for use on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Just go to jfrog.com/getcli. Here's a quick rundown of what actions are available to you with the CLI. Pretty much everything that you can do in the UI. The CLI is regularly updated with additional functionality. The CLI can be used in combination with the Artifactory query language. Basically, this amounts to having the ability to query for a set of artifacts and then take some sort of action on them. A good real-world scenario for doing this would be to perform a cleanup operation against a repository. You could use AQL to return all the artifacts that are greater than a given size and that are older than a given amount of time that have never been downloaded, and then delete them. One thing to note about this specific example is although an artifact can be removed from a repository, the actual artifact file will not be deleted unless it isn't referenced by another repository. AQL is designed to be flexible, to run on any of the 3 different types of repositories we discussed earlier, local, remote, and virtual. It can also tie into compatible build plugins. These features, especially the availability of fully functional APIs and the JFrog CLI, will grow your world even more. This is another really busy slide, but it's a good representation of the range of tools that we have existing integrations with. As you can see, Artifactory is right in the middle of it all. If you follow this flow from step 1, where a developer declares dependencies, all the way to step 10, where software is rolled out for distribution, you can see that Artifactory and the JFrog platform can potentially be involved in every step of the way. We've come down to a final question now. Why use Artifactory? Well, ultimately because you want to build faster, troubleshoot faster, and release faster. To accomplish this, Artifactory provides a full REST API for everything, optimized command line interface, a single pane of glass unified experience across all of the JFrog products, highly extensible plugin framework to enable hooking and enhanced automation, built-in integration with automation tools for CI/CD, metadata on everything that you can use to make decisions on promotion, on cleanup, or simply track an artifact's history. Now I'd like to give you a quick tour of the JFrog platform interface so that the next time you see it, it'll be familiar to you. All right, you should be able to see the interface here where I'm going to log in. This is an environment that we use that has a bunch of stuff set up already in it, just so that we can navigate around and kind of show you the ropes and show you the new interface. So as you can see right away, it's pretty clean. On the left is the menu items that we're going to be navigating here. These reflect all of the different products that JFrog offers. So this dashboard section here, this would be more like mission control information. Here's Artifactory. Here you have a package view, builds view, and then of course artifact view, which is probably the most recognizable view that we have. This is what most people think of when they think of Artifactory and how to navigate the different repositories. The packages view is new. It's pretty cool. It's a different way of looking at things. It's not so much around repository, it's around the package itself. I like all of this information, tells you, how many times it's been downloaded. You can actually drill down into these as well and get more information. All of these menu items are like that. There's only one version here for this package, but we can continue to drill down into that version and look at all of the metadata associated. Here we have distribution. It looks like we have a distribution here set up. Let's go ahead and drill down here. We'll pick a version. There's all kinds of information here. The files that are included in this distribution. Release notes, very informative. Distribution tracking. This is really cool. So this is your edge note, and this indicates that a distribution actually happened and completed successfully. X-ray data, if there is any. Let's look at security and see what that looks like. Yeah, okay, so here's some security items here. They look low severity. Well, we can drill down into one of these. This is the really cool thing about X-ray, is that not only does it tell you that there's a vulnerability in this package, but it tells you exactly where the vulnerability is. It also includes, the summary of what it's about, the actual component that is infected, references, which are very helpful. All of this information can help you mitigate the problem. Your other option is you can set up rules where you would fail a build or something if this vulnerability was detected. And that way you can protect yourself from letting any of these get out into production. That's a pretty powerful thing to do. I'm going to skip over pipelines just for a second since we're talking about X-ray. That is this section here. You can set up policies and watches. These are where you do set up all of the rules, which repositories you want to monitor, which you want to set rules for. What I suggested earlier as far as preventing, vulnerabilities from getting out into the wild, you'll want to be careful about setting too much all at once. You really need to have some policies in place and everyone be on the same page as far as what's acceptable and what isn't, and what's going to become a problem in the near future, to give everyone a chance to mitigate on their own a little bit. The last thing you want, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is to have every build of yours fail because of a single vulnerability that you can't do anything about. So definitely consider that when you're setting this stuff up. The pipeline section is really cool. So if you look at my pipelines, it looks like we have a few set up here. I'm going to look at the distribution pipeline and drill down here. And this opens up in a different tab. And it shows you a visual of what your pipeline actually looks like and what your triggers actually are. And then on each of these squares are steps in your pipeline. You can click on a step and you can get information about it, what it was triggered by, what the last run was. You can get logs from it. All of the runs for this pipeline are all down here. So it looks like this one has been run a number of times. And these you can look at individually, and you can get, in-depth information about what happened at each step. It's a pretty cool product. I encourage you to try this out if you haven't already. All right, let's go back to our main menu. All right, so on this left side here, you notice that we are in this application module. The other half of this is an administration module. And this is where repositories are actually set up and created. And here we see the different types of repositories we talked about earlier. We've got local, remote, virtual, and here's the distribution one that I mentioned earlier that I didn't have included in the slides, but it's definitely for the higher level plans. So let's pick a local repository and just open it up and take a look at it. Note down at the bottom here, you have the option of setting the repository, whether or not it's going to be indexed by X-ray. Get out of here. I'm going to show you what it looks like to create a new local repository. So you have all of these package types that you can choose from. Just for fun, I'm going to create a NPM repository. Let's see. App, NPM, and then let's say I want to create like a staging repository. And that's all you would need to put in. I mean, that's all that's required. There's lots of other settings that you can play with. I'm going to go ahead and click Enable Indexing in X-ray and save and finish that repository. And here it is. You can do the same with remote. I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these existing remote repositories so we can look at how it's set up. So again, it has a key that you put in, just like local repositories. This URL is actually the URL of the public repository that it will pull stuff from. So when your developers, if they were to use this repository key and the path for this repo, it would check its local cache first and then go out and try to pull a dependency from this URL. Right. The virtual repository, these are definitely the most interesting. So let's just pick one and explore. There's a Team 1 Docker one. It looks like it has 4 repositories inside of it. So let's open it up, and sure enough. So when you set up these virtual repositories, you have the option of adding any of the repositories that work for that package type, but you can be really creative on how you set up your virtual repositories. It all depends on how you want to deal with your permission models and stuff. One thing to note is, when you add your repositories here, they are in order. So when this repository is being used, the repository that's at the top, it's going to be used to resolve a dependency first before moving on to the second one. So by moving these around, you can really change, how efficient your builds are. For example, if you have a remote public repository that's kind of slow or something in here, and it's at the beginning, and you're always checking that first before going to your local repositories, you can really make some differences in how fast your builds go. All right, so there are a number of other things here in this administration tab. This is where we handle identity and access. You can set up users and groups and all of their permissions.
And what's cool about this is that this applies to all of the products in the suite. So no longer do you have to coordinate or try to set up permissions or anything, between products. There's license information here. Monitoring information. This is kind of nice, be able to tell, how many binaries you have in your system, how much space they're taking up. Down here in this Artifactory section, there's a little bit of administration you can do. I think you can, here's logs if you need to look at those. Same with X-ray. Same with pipelines.
That concludes the demo. If you would like to see a more personalized demo, please feel free to click on the Request a Demo button you see in the resources list, and we can offer you a technical session with one of our solution engineers. On our website, we have a really good resource called JFrog Academy. There are a number of classes available there that are in the format of video tutorials with quizzes to indicate whether you retain the information. The courses are about 25 to 30 minutes each. They're perfect for beginners to Artifactory and some of the other JFrog products as well. There's specific content geared toward administrators, developers, and DevOps engineers. Some recommended learning paths, and there's some new refreshed 2020 content as well. These are all free and open to the public, so feel free to go and sign up at your leisure. Okay, where do I get Artifactory? This last important question. We have multiple service plans to choose from that will set you up for success and grow your organization from wherever you're starting from. On our website at jfrog.com, there is a pricing section that details the differences for each of the plans offered. We have our OSS version, our community edition for C and C++ developers. There are various on-prem options, including Pro, Pro X, which includes X-ray, Enterprise or Enterprise Plus subscriptions. We also offer a hybrid option, leveraging both an on-prem setup as well as one of our many SaaS plans with your choice of cloud providers. This works well if you want to start in your own data center and then expand or be able to take artifacts as they are produced and push them to a cloud instance. You can choose whether you want to handle your installation and upgrades yourself with our on-prem solutions, or you can choose a SaaS subscription where we will handle that for you, convenient for a startup that only needs a single instance. No matter which option you choose, the JFrog platform will set you up for success and grow with your organization. In summary, sometimes managing DevOps feels like this. I've had those days. When efficient DevOps should feel like this. We're here to help you get closer to this feeling. All right, we're now ready for Q&A. Again, if I don't get to your question during this session, I'll follow up with answers afterward. The first one we have, do you have any code samples? Yes. JFrog has quite a few public GitHub repositories available. If you just do a search in GitHub for JFrog, you'll see quite a few. There's one repository specifically called Project Examples that has a collection of examples using different package types and also a bunch of samples of different integrations with other tooling. There's some around OpenShift, Jenkins, CircleCI. There's a Build Info Java example. We do encourage the community to contribute to these as well, and there's some instructions in that repository on how to get set up to do that. All right, another question, do we offer trial versions? Yes. If you want to get your hands dirty and dive into some of the features that you've seen that I've showed you here today, we have on-prem trials available from our website. Generally, I think they're 30 days. You can also sign up for a limited, free, no credit card required JFrog managed SaaS version. Those are limited on some of the features, but you can certainly pick that just to try it out and see how it goes. You can choose your own cloud provider and region. And even if you already have Artifactory, getting a trial version will let you try out some things like X-ray and pipelines that your current license might not have. So definitely take advantage of that. For the SaaS plans, what cloud providers are available? All right, for these plans, you have the choice of AWS, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure. You can also choose what region that you would like. Does X-ray rescan for vulnerabilities when there are updates? Yes, when we get a database update, X-ray will rescan artifacts that have changed. You can also target groups of artifacts or repositories and trigger a scan that way. Last question, I'm curious about pipelines. Where can I get more information? If you go to our homepage at jfrog.com and go to the resources section, there is a resource center link. Clicking on that will take you to a page where you can access all kinds of different information on all of our products. There's some filters in there for the different products, and pipelines is one of them. You can also filter by type of resource, blog, webinar, white paper, etc. So check that area out. There's a lot of valuable information in there. All right. Thanks everyone for being here today. I hope you learned something helpful, something that you can take back to your teams, and please feel free to reach out with any more questions that you have.